The movie begins with a bustling city and massive skyscrapers. It's a very busy day with people running around here and there. The scene then shifts to a majestic museum with artifacts from different cultures. There are statues and wax models of various tribes. The museum even consists of medieval animals and fossils. Just then, a picture of Kamenra, an ancient Egyptian royal, is shown. One night, the museum's watch guard walks into the place and senses as though something is wrong but ignores it. He then sees the job manual but decides against reading it. The guard, whose name is Ronnie, dozes off soon enough after assuming that nothing could go wrong. Suddenly, all the statues of the museum start glowing and coming to life. Ronnie jerks up immediately after hearing some strange noises. He tries to remain calm until a monkey comes up to his work desk. This makes him anxious and he tries to shoo it away. Just then, another man dressed up as a wilderness explorer comes up to him. He claims to be Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States. Ronnie starts to think that some lunatics have infiltrated the museum. He tries to call the police only to have a humongous lion in front of him. This makes him extremely scared, and so he runs out of the museum. On his way out, he sees all the statues and ancient animals of the museum come to life. They're all out to get him, and Ronnie tries his best to hide. He somehow manages to escape, which makes all the museum statues cheer in excitement. It's their fun activity to scare the workers away, never to return. As Ronnie escapes, he runs into a young man who happens to know exactly what happened at the museum. It seems he already knows about the museum's secret. The man, whose name is Larry, goes to the museum and sees all the museum creatures running around. Frustrated, he yells at all of them for scaring away yet another night guard. In response, one of the museum exhibits, a Lemhi Shoshone woman named Sacagawea, says that the guard just wasn't the right match for them. Theodore Roosevelt agrees and says that they'd much rather prefer Larry's son, Nick, to become the guard instead. Larry instantly refuses and calls Dr. McPhee to sort the situation out. Dr. McPhee picks up the call and simply replies that it's Larry's problem and hangs up. Having no other option, Larry hesitantly decides to hire Nick since he knows that his son is already aware of the museum's secret and wouldn't run away like the others. Just then, we see Nick, a very clumsy teenager, running around the school. He wants to impress his crush, Mia, but trips and falls down in the process. Despite the embarrassment, Nick still doesn't give up and starts chatting with Mia. Just when he's about to ask Mia on a date, he gets called for his jazz band audition. He's a DJ and wants to incorporate his music with jazz. Nick goes on to perform well, but right then Bodhi, another music enthusiast, crashes his audition. Nick has a talent for correctly identifying any note of any song. Because of this, he can always find out if any song or music is off tune. Towards the end of his audition, Nick becomes very nervous and ends up ruining his performance. He thinks that he has messed up and walks away disheartened even though his music teacher wants to include him in the jazz band. He doesn't even listen to his teacher and walks out thinking he just wasted her time. Leah goes on to comfort Nick, but he doesn't respond to her properly. It seems she also has a thing for Nick. She tries to ask him on a date, but Nick doesn't even let her speak. He's too clueless to realize that Mia likes him just as much as he does. Later that evening, Nick and Larry go out for dinner. There, Larry consoles Nick and asks him not to give up so easily. He then takes this opportunity to explain to Nick that while he will be guarding the History Museum in Japan, Nick could work as the night guard for the American Museum. Nick is excited about the job, but rejects it thinking he will fail. He thinks that he doesn't have what it takes since he's very clumsy. However, Larry manages to get him to agree and even convinces his ex-wife, Erica, by saying that this could be a great opportunity for Nick to grow as a person. The next day, Nick finally goes to the American Museum where he meets Dr. McPhee. Just as he's getting the instructions for working as a night guard, the exhibits start coming to life. Desperate, Nick sends Dr. McPhee out of the museum as quickly as he can. After that, he happily greets all the museum exhibits who are elated to see him as the new night guard. Sacagawea, along with Theodore, Dexter the monkey, Attila the Hun, and Joan of Arc all give presents to him and welcome Nick to their group. Just then, Nick gets a call from Larry, who seems to be very excited. Larry gives a brief tour of the Japanese museum to Nick and exhibits. They are all very impressed by it. Before ending the call, Larry reminds Nick of the rule they have, that is, the tablet in the museum controls everything, and all the exhibits must return to the museum by sunrise or they turn to dust. Along with that, Nick must also always lock the basement and the loading dock within it. Nick seems very scared of the basement as a very dark secret lies inside. Towards the end, Larry assures Nick that he'll do great and reminds him that keeping all the exhibits at bay is the most important part of his job. Nick understands and bids farewell to his father. After some time, he nervously goes to the basement, which seems to be packed with all sorts of crazy and creepy stuff. Nick timidly walks up to the loading dock and tries to lock it, but something inside screams out, which causes Nick to flee. He runs out of the basement as soon as possible without securing the loading dock properly. After Nick leaves, all the exhibits within the basement laugh, thinking they made another night guard run for his life. But much to their dismay, the most powerful entity gets unleashed. As the loading dock was left open, Kamenra gets released and he's out to rule the world. Meanwhile, Nick reaches Theodore and Sacagawea and tells them that he's locked the door. He's sweating profusely, which makes the exhibits confused, but they just ignore him. Soon after, Kamenra sneakily walks to the center of the museum and steals the magical tablet. When Theodore finds this out, he starts panicking, and so does Nick. Sacagawea along with Nick and Theodore runs off to find the tablet. That's when they see Kamenra, the King of Kings. He's a clumsy and comical antagonist who wants to take over the world. With the help of the tablet, he plans to awaken his army of the dead from the underworld. All the exhibits see him and chase Kamenra as he runs out of the museum. Nick runs into all sorts of hurdles, and so Kamenra escapes, but the Egyptian tyrant soon faces Joan of Arc. The two starts fighting, but Kamenra somehow leaves the museum with the tablet. Nick, along with all the exhibits, gets very stressed as the tablet is a very powerful artifact. Just as they're about to lose all hope, Joan of Arc gets a vision that shows Kamenra in the Metropolis Art Museum. But unfortunately, the museum happens to be halfway across the city, and the exhibits can't stay out past sunrise. Because of this, they take the local subway. On the other hand, Kamenra reaches the Metropolis Art Museum, where he brings all his loyal subjects back to life. Even though his subjects despise him, they agree to his plan of world dominion. Meanwhile, all the exhibits from the American Museum reach the Metropolis Art Museum. There, they see all the Egyptian entities alive. Nick is confused as to how Kamenra plans to accomplish his mission. That's when Theodore says that since the magical tablet can bring any art exhibit to life, Kamenra wishes to use it on the Temple of Dendur, which is an ancient Egyptian temple. With the tablet's magic, Kamenra wants to enter the temple and use it as a portal to go back to ancient Egypt. Just then, Sacagawea sees Kamenra trying to find the temple. All the exhibits start chasing him, but the tyrant is way too fast. That's when Theodore pours oil all over the floor, which causes Kamenra to slip. But he somehow ends up entering a painting of George Washington traveling to Delaware. Nick shakes the painting, and Kamenra falls out. However, Kamenra doesn't want to lose, so he runs inside a pyramid that brings all the exhibits to life. To accomplish his plan, he also brings back Seth, the Egyptian god of chaos. Much to his disappointment, Seth turns out to be nothing more than a tiny elephant with a mole rat's head. Desperate to win, Kamenra asks Seth for help and offers that if Seth does help him, they could rule the world together. Seth agrees and starts shooting lasers through his eyes to create chaos. Right then, Kamenra uses the tablet to bring back a giant scorpion. Nick and his friends try to land a hit on the scorpion, but the creature is just too strong. Finally, Joan manages to slice the scorpion's stomach. That's when Dexter also starts distracting the scorpion, which causes it to hit itself and explode. While the others are busy fighting the scorpion, Kamenra uses the tablet to open a portal to ancient Egypt and enters it. Nick and the others defeat the scorpion and celebrate, but suddenly, they see the open portal and enter inside as well. They're really scared as to what awaits them, but keep on walking. Just then, Nick suddenly stops. His friends inquire about what's wrong, and that's when Nick confesses that he feels guilty and is scared that he might mess up again. His friends understand him and comfort him with some encouraging words. Meanwhile, Kamenra and Seth get on a boat to go to their destination, and the others quickly follow them. Nick and his team are on the boat when Joan gets another vision about Kamenra and Nick fighting. Just then, Laa, a Neanderthal exhibit who also happens to be Nick's friend, claims to see a dinosaur. However, it turns out to be a Nile alligator. They somehow manage to deal with the alligator and start moving again. On the other hand, Kamenra finally reaches the Temple of the Sun. He and Seth enter the temple through a hole and plan to unleash deadly monsters soon. Nick and his team also reach the temple, and they enter through the massive hole as well. That's when they see some murals. Nick and his team examine the mural carefully, which states that when Kamenra presses 3 sacred chords, he can summon his soldiers from the underworld. All of the exhibits get scared and try to get to Kamenra as soon as possible. They go down a hallway and duck just in time to avoid a trap. After a lot of hurdles, the team finally catches up to Kamenra, but it seems he has already brought back 2 statue warriors of death. A fight between the two sides begins. Octavius and Jedediah, who were in Nick's pocket the whole time, try to get out of there, but due to their bad luck, they end up falling through a hole in the ground. That's when they land in front of a cat who looks at them hungrily. However, the car soon flees when a massive snake starts to approach the 2 miniature soldiers. Having no other choice, Octavius throws his suit into the snake's mouth, which causes it to choke. Because of this, the snake is now scared and slithers away. The hungry cat from before approaches them once again, but instead of devouring them, it licks them, and they all become friends. In the meantime, Nick and his team end up defeating one of Kamenra's soldiers by destroying its eyes. After that, Nick takes the lead and hides in a hole with a trap of arrows. That's when he accidentally activates a deadly trap, causing the arrows to hit the other soldier, defeating it. Unfortunately, Kamonra reaches the sarcophagus and places the tablet where it is supposed to be placed. He then presses the first and second chords, but just when he is about to press the final chord, he hears a scream. Suddenly, Dexter comes sliding out of the sarcophagus's mouth and lands on top of him. Dexter slaps Kamonra in order to stop him. Kamonra then picks up Dexter's tail and throws him away toward the rest of his team. Finally free, Kamonra is about to press the final chord but is interrupted again by Octavius, Jedediah, and their cat, who ends up scratching Seth. Desperate, Kamonra holds off any distraction that might occur and presses the final chord quickly. A massive portal opens, and so Kamonra's soldiers from the underworld slowly start coming into the temple. Nick's team tries to fight them off, but it's of no use as more and more soldiers keep on appearing. Just then, Nick goes for the tablet, but falls off a cliff. The others are devastated to see this and think that he's gone. Fortunately, Nick saves himself by hanging onto the cliff with his bracelet. He climbs out and starts running toward the tablet again. Nick finally reaches the tablet and starts pressing all the chords backward. He successfully presses 2 chords, but just then, Kamonra stops him by pushing him backward and stabbing him with his sword. However, it doesn't work as Nick gets saved by a pair of glasses that Theodore had given him as a sign of good luck. In an attempt to defeat his enemies, Kamonra destroys the instructions of the chords. This means that Nick can't play the chords anymore. But just then, Nick whips out his DJ tablet and presses the last chord on his virtual piano. The portal soon starts sucking Kamonra along with his soldiers back into the underworld. The Egyptian tyrant plans on taking Nick with him as well, but Nick's gang pulls him back just in time. The temple then starts shaking, and so all the exhibits run out of there. However, it seems the sun has already risen. Because of this, all of them start fading into dust. They all share a moment together as their last goodbye, but just then, Nick remembers that he still has the tablet. He quickly takes out a picture of the museum and uses the tablet to create a portal. In the end, all the exhibits return safely to the museum without any harm. After the whole fiasco, Nick gets a call from Larry, who he assures by claiming that everything is okay. All the exhibits start celebrating their victory, but Dr. McPhee comes in just then and sees the cat statue. To Nick's surprise, he actually likes the statue and places it on a desk. Later, Nick exits the museum and returns to his music class with a new team. They all play a new song together and perform amazingly. After the performance, Nick and Mia exit while holding hands. The movie finally ends with all the exhibits of the museum dancing and enjoying themselves to Nick's new song.